Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. We're just going to wait a minute to let people trickle in, and then we will get started. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining the Nation State Threats Small Town Defenses Securing Municipal Water in Geopolitical Crossfire. Thank you. I'm going to be handing it off to Sam Elva. We'll be doing a Q&A at the end, so feel free to write any questions in there or in the chat.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, and good afternoon, depending on where you are in the U.S. My name is Sam Alva, and I will be your moderator today and presenter. So again, today I'm going to present nation-state threats, small-town defenses, securing municipal water, and a geopolitical crossfire. So before I begin, I want to make sure this is kind of specific towards the water sector. However, if you're in critical manufacturing, if you're in any of the other 16 different critical infrastructure, critical manufacturing, healthcare, finance, a lot of these remediations apply to you. A lot of these threats apply to you. So if you have questions, don't hesitate to put them in the chat and we'll get them answered. All right, small and mid-sized water utilities are now facing adversaries they were never built to fight. Across 12 states, state-sponsored threat actors linked to China, Russia, and Iran are targeting municipal water systems with tactics once reserved for military operations, including OT, pre-positioning information warfare, and psychological operations aimed at undermining public trust. So one of the things why this means, or it has meant a lot to me over the last 30, 40 years that I've been in this environment, is a little bit of background on myself. I'm a 22-year veteran. Half of my career, I did NSA Red Team. I used to break into government facilities, both from a physical perspective and a cyber perspective. And what we're seeing now is very similar to the operations that we conducted almost 20 years ago. So I'm gonna cover that, give you a little bit of a background, what that looks like, and align it to what we're currently seeing now. So again, 22-year veteran, was part of the NSA Red Team. After I left the military, I became an OT operator. I installed, designed, managed kind of that environment. At one time, I felt like I call it the dark ages, just for the simple fact is I didn't know what I was doing. Control boards and actuators and sensors and pumps and things that normally people, there's no school for that. And so I was learning a skill set that I didn't really know how valuable it was until until I came to work for CISA. And if those of you are familiar, CISA is a cybersecurity infrastructure security agency. I was with them for almost 10 years. If you're familiar with them, I was a protective security advisor. Then shortly, I became the cybersecurity advisor. And then I helped assist in. Is there an issue with the screen? Sorry, I don't want to keep going. People are not seeing the screen. Are we good? All right, I'm going to continue. So part of my end of my CISA career, a couple of things that were okay, excellent. A couple of things that were beneficial. One, before leaving CISA, I was building CISA's OT program. If you guys want some information on it, I could send that to you. But one of the things that what we built the OT program off of was three things: knowledge, skill set, and ability. Meaning you could have the knowledge, but unless you're actually doing OT stuff and applying it, it kind of makes it null and void. And that's one of the things that we push or we provide, is making sure that whoever you're hiring to protect your OT environment, make sure those three things are apparent. Because you don't want somebody who's just Googled the end of the Google and on OT stuff. You want somebody who understands the culture, understand that has stepped foot in a water facility, in a energy substation, or on the floor of a critical manufacturing plant. So make sure those things are apparent. So, so before I begin, the pictures that you see on the right-hand side are real pictures of my past career. As you can see, the reason why I have them leveled there, so the top ones are actual IDs that I helped develop. They are CAT cards. We were told we couldn't make them 100% real, because we wanted to make sure that, like social engineering, or like when you get an email, you have to be able to, for training purpose, for them to identify if it was a fake or real. But as you could see on the second picture that you see there, us actually using it. And then once we gained initial access, we gained more access. So as you could see here, that is me in front of an F-22. And then that's some of my partners in secure areas, as the picture up top was an AWACS aircraft. So again, these things, I did it for, again, about 12 years, and we were 100% successful. When I first started doing red teaming, the first time I did it, I thought to myself, there's no way I'm going to get caught. There's no way I'm going to be able to break into all these facilities. And I realized that the human element is your weakest link. We would aggress military installations, DoD facilities around the world. And if you're familiar with the military, a lot of military organizations have a 2-year turnover rate. And bases that we would hit, we'd go back 3 years later and we would use the same tactics and they would still work. And the reason why is there was not a lot of continuity. Those individuals left. And so the same tactics that we used, they worked again. So what we're seeing now, especially with what's going on with APTs, advanced persistent threats, and nation state actors, is if we assume that they're not getting assistance, so the IRGC, which is the Iran nation state actors, are not getting assistance from China or Russia, we are hugely wrong. So this is kind of what those operations look like. You got your preliminary target selection, your initial surveillance, final threat selection, pre-attack surveillance, planning, rehearsal, execution, escape. So what we're seeing now is, unfortunately, we're seeing attacks by nation states and APTs on an environment that is not prepared to battle. And that's the unfortunate piece. And so I'm going to cover some basic things that maybe we'll be able to help to implement. I know we have a lot of organizations that don't have the resources we call resource poor, but these are things that you could implement internally, and hopefully become a harder target instead of being a soft target, what we're seeing now. All right, if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not to fear the result of 100 battles. I love Sun Tzu. I have sayings in here. For the simple fact is that what I was talking about earlier, about when we used to aggress facilities, we'd go back 3 years later and the same things would work. I don't know how many times I wore a hard hat and I had a clipboard. I could pretty much get into any place. Um, Usually, we would either tell people that either they're getting something new or we were there to fix something that may have been broken. Um, and it always worked. Social engineering was one of the things that we were really good at, and with now that we have AI, it's they almost make it perfect. It's hard to even um, fight against it. I mean, before you could look at an email from overseas, and usually the language was wrong or something was wrong where you could identify it. But now we're using AI to create these emails, and they're almost perfect. Now you don't even need to be cyber savvy anymore. They have ransomware as a service. Throughout my years as a Fed, we worked a lot with the three-letter alphabets, and it's pretty alarming to see um, the the espionage, the insider threat, the collusion that's going on, and we're going to cover a little bit of those things here. So, specific nation-state tools, tactics, and procedures (TTPs). So again, Russian and Chinese officers serve as permanent advisor with enhanced cyber units. Now, again, this information that you're seeing, I scavenged all over the place, used some contacts. So again, if we are not, I was watching, I don't know if none of you guys watch Lioness, but I was watching that and they were talking about Russian and China and Iran and just the threats out there. And it was funny because I was giving this briefing today and they were saying that China won't attack us, Russia won't. They were calling China the wolf, Russia. I can't remember what they're. Anyways, my point is that we have to understand that the GRUs of the world, the M5s, the Secret Service, they exist. I have been on missions, or I've done things where generals have told me plain and simple that didn't happen. And it was like the Jedi mind trick. They would just wave their hand and be like, "Nope, that didn't happen. That didn't happen. That didn't happen." So we have to get into that mindset that we're already compromised. We see it time and time again. Like I always tell people, prior to 2023, nobody knew what OT was. I know I was that guy where every time I came into a meeting, they were like, "Oh, here comes Sam Alvey. He's going to talk about OT again." And now you can't open up LinkedIn without seeing everybody's an OT expert. Um, and so the information you're seeing here is information that I've gathered. I always tell people about what's the difference between intelligence and news. Old intelligence is news. And so that's why it's important to make sure that you're following things like CISA or other CVEs like through NIST or anything like that. Be current on the threats and vulnerabilities out there. Iranian cyber army known as, and you'll see this a lot of time, APTs 33, 34, 35, 42. A lot of people will see cyber avengers. Their primary targets right now are water and wastewater facilities, energy grids, and transportation networks. Why? Because they disrupt. It causes havoc. Not only that, though, water is a single point of failure. Like I said, 12 facilities or 12 states were compromised. If you look at how they hit all of these facilities, they hit something different every time. It was either a pump or they locked people out. And it's there to me, I still feel that they're testing. A week prior to all these attacks, I had a meeting with the FBI and I told them this is exactly what they're going to do. And the reason why is because we have become dependent on technology. I don't, and again, I don't know any of the attendees that are attending here, but one of the things you have to understand is when you look at, when I was a Fed and I went out and did assessments, both on the physical and the cyber side, it wasn't if you were going to get hit, it's when you were going to get hit and how quickly would you be able to recover. And we would tell them that. How quickly would you be able to recover? And that's the big thing right now between IT and OT is IT is data driven, OT is process driven. That people say OT equals making money, and you could see it. We had Fairlife got hit. I know they weren't down for long, and they said, "Oh, we didn't lose anything." But there's some organizations that they can't go to manual operations. like water. But the only problem with water is that a lot of facilities are so dependent on technology. For example, an average large water facility requires about 44 people. Most large water facilities don't have 44 people. They may have 20. So I had the unfortunate to respond to a ransomware attack on a drinking water facility, and they were calling people, retired individuals, to come back to help them to continue the manual operations. And as you can see, a lot of these places that got hit, they haven't really discussed what happens or what. I know they're still doing investigation, but that's the biggest vulnerability is how long can they maintain manual operations before degradation occurs? And that's something you have to take into consideration within your environment. Sure. Okay, nation state use information warfare and psychological operations to target operational technology by combining cyber attacks with disinformation. This tactic aims to confuse human operators, break trust in critical infrastructure, and delay emergency response during a physical disruption. So let's talk about human operators. When you think about human operators, I like to think of our first line of defense, those individuals who are on the floor in any capacity. Those are your first lines of defense. We have to make sure that they're prepared to respond. A lot of the times when back in 2024, I helped the state of Kansas build their first OT Essentials course for the water sector. And so I traveled around the state of Kansas and I did basic OT Essentials. And I'm talking about what is a WAP, what is a gateway, what is an end device. And it was amazing to see the lights turn on because most operators do not take any type of cybersecurity training, yet they operate that every single day. And I'll give you a story when we had, and this is public news, but the city of Arc City got hit, and it was the Russians, and they didn't even know they hit a water facility. And so because of my credibility here, I responded with the FBI there. And when we got on scene, of course, they showed me the blue screen of death. And I said, okay, I said, we need to control the narrative. Because unlike IT, I immediately asked how many people, how many operators already contacted their wives and said, hey, the water is broken, and to the operator said, yes, they did. And I said, we need to control the narrative because bad information spread through social media could be horrible, especially when you're the only source of drinking water in that city. And so I said, hey, we need to contact public affairs. We need to make sure we get a message out saying, hey, we've experienced an issue, but everything is fine, because everything was fine. We didn't want to scare anybody. And so I started talking to everybody. I said, hey, tell me what happened over the last 24 hours, because we wanted to kind of get an idea of what happened. Because unlike an IT ransomware attack, in OT, we have to maintain operations. There's no, oh, everybody sits around the room till somebody contacts the APT and talk about Bitcoin or whatever. No, operations and in OT operations still need to occur. And so I said, okay, anybody tell me what happened over the last 24 hours? And so I had one individual in there. It was a young operator, probably 25 years old. After everybody left, he goes, sir, can I tell you something? And I said, yes. And he goes, so my wife bought one of those like a grab bag from like a thrift store or whatever, and it had a thumb drive in it. And he goes, yeah, he goes, I plugged that thumb drive in the computer that he remotes into the SCADA system. And so I thought to myself, that's it. That's how they got in. And I was like, he's like, sir, I didn't know. But that him just telling me that just shows the training and awareness of our human operators. We need to increase that. So again, depending on the environment that you are in, you have to look at your human operators. Again, they're the ones that are your first line of defense. They're the ones that if and when I talked about when I was saying is about when I did red teaming, social engineering, like I said, the human element is your weakest link. And your operators is our human element, and that's who they're targeting now. Nation-state actors combine operational technology and cyber attacks with information warfare and psychological operations to create strategic cohesion. So again, those operators that operate those machinery, those who are our APTs in nation state are attacking. If it's online, through social media, through, there was a thing when I used to do, when I was a red teamer, we used to go to Nellis, and that's where Red Flag Alpha and a bunch of other stuff that goes on there. But I don't know if you ever know what OPSEC is. It's Operation Security. And there was a saying that says, if she's hot and you're not, think OPSEC. Meaning the Israelis use very attractive women to get information from dumb U.S. soldiers, and it worked every time. And so it was just a saying. But what my point is that if you don't think those things are going on, they are. And we need to change how we look at the threat and our current vulnerabilities, because it's changed. Nation state threats, small town defenses. Your threats now are backed by the Chinese or Russians or North Koreans, and they're a lot more advanced. They're already operating in converged environments. So unless, and we'll talk about convergence, but unless you have that type of environment, it's going to be very easy for them to exploit your OT environment. So these three things here. So back in 2024, when we first had those breaches, I did a lot of stuff for the EPA. I helped them build their OT sanitary survey. And so the EPA thought it was a great idea to start sending me HMIs. So this, what you're seeing here, were real compromised HMI, meaning if you had access to this, it means you could shut off a pump, you could manipulate operations in water and wastewater. These were real. This was the unfortunate piece, is every time they sent these to me, I would contact the local water facility that these belong to, and 9 out of 10 times they didn't have a cyber team. They didn't have anybody. Usually it was some guy at his house, and I would say, "Hey, bud, can I speak to Tim?" And he's like, "Yeah, this is Tim." And I'm like, "Hey, man, your SCADA HMI, your human interface is open on the web." And he's like, "What do you want me to do about it?" And I said, "Well, we need to secure this IP address." And he's like, "I don't know how to do that." And I said, "Well, they could turn off a pump." And he goes, "I'll just turn it back on again." And so there was very little urgency. And I got about 12 of these that were sent to me. And finally, I'm like, "Stop sending them to me. We can't fix them." So what is occurring now? It wasn't a shocker to me. And we're gonna, and as we go through this, it's alarming to know how broken the system is right now. And like I always say, it's going to take a village to protect this environment. Again, targeting the human operator, eroding confidence, adversaries spread false news or panic about plant safety to make operators doubt system readings. Again, as you could see, if you looked at the breaches that occurred, they did. They would change passwords, lock the operator out, and so forth and so forth. To me, you have a lot of the. To me, I think we've been surviving over the last few years from, I call it security through obscurity, meaning our nation state actors are still trying to figure out how they could completely disrupt our operations. And I think they're figuring it out. I mean, again, they hit 12 states in Minnesota, or is it Minnesota? They hit 30 facilities. They're still trying to figure out how they could make it last longer. To continue with targeting the human operator, cognitive overload, fake alerts, manipulated SCADA dashboards, flood control rooms, and laying human action during an incident. Target phishing. State actors use customized social engineering against engineers with access to industrial control systems. So again, if you look at your operators and engineers within your environment, making sure that they are aware of these tactics. If they don't know that this is occurring, they could very easily get social engineered and can have their username and passwords be stolen. And again, and they won't initially attack then, but it's that long-term access when we talk about living off the land. Those particular tactics where they just stay there and they wait till somebody from higher up says, okay, we're going to hit now. Combining physical and psychological effects, time disruptions. I was just talking about that. A lot of times they'll have access, but they won't act. Again, that's kind of the living off the land. They use, especially when it comes to OT environments, we don't do a lot of log management. Matter of fact, very little log management goes into the OT environment. Cyber attacks on power grids or water systems are coordinated with public panic campaigns to maximize fear. Masking sabotage, malware can trick monitors, tools into showing normal metrics while physical damage occurs in the background. A while back ago, they were talking about a sensor that manages the chemical, the amount of chemical that goes in or not enough. The CISA made it public, said, hey, there's a vulnerability in these particular devices, and I felt like no one did anything about it. You know what I mean? And people always say, well, Sam, but if the government knows that there's breaches, why don't they just tell everybody, hey, this is what's going on? And I said they can't do that. I said because it would cause the stock market to crash. It'd be horrible. They wouldn't be able to just tell you, hey, we're completely compromised. But if you do enough research, enough OSINT, open source information, it's scary to see what is out there, especially when you're not looking at US websites. You're looking at go Google Al Jazeera and websites that are not here. You could find some pretty disturbing and some good intelligence out there. Why playbooks fail? One of the big things what I feel, and again, we could go into long, but the two of the biggest things is incorrectly scoped OT environments. So we're going to cover both of them. We're going to cover low capacity and high capacity, and then we're going to cover unconverged versus converged OT environments. So lower capacity utilities are those that face technical, financial, or management challenges, making it hard for them to keep up with investments, technology regulations, infrastructure opportunities that, like conferences, training. They generally lack the resource to focus on improvements. So this makes up about over 90% of the environment, unfortunately. I had this particular news blurb. This is Schiff introduced Water Shield Act to boost cybersecurity, addressing growing threats across water utilities. But here's the problem, though, is most states don't even have OT programs. And the reason why I know that is because I was hired by the governor for the state of Kansas to build their OT program. But again, unfortunately, because we don't have a new governor, they didn't give me any funding. So I'm like, so can I build my program? They're like, no, well, maybe when the governor comes in. As you know, our governor's getting elected here at the end of the sometime maybe in November, but I would have been with them for a whole year without developing anything. Our program is finished, but as you could see with lower capacities, they don't have the resources. And so there are working groups out there. And if you do find a working group, be part of those working groups, because there's people like me who volunteer. Like I'm part of GMIS, I'm part of ASIS, I'm part of InfraGard, I'm part of a lot of different groups. And so we encourage you to be part of these groups, because I mean, if you have any type of concern, anything with OT, I'm pretty sure my contact information is here, but or reach out to me or reach out to Christian, or any of your CEs through Nova Coast, and they'll give you my contact information, and I will gladly share with you all this information that's readily available on the World Wide Web. I just was able to get it all together for you. So higher capacity utilities have sufficient technical, financial, and management resources, but still struggle with basic cybersecurity measures. Even with the resources, cybersecurity may not be a priority due to other challenges like aging infrastructure and new regulations. So I don't know, again, I don't know who's in this, if you're regulated or not, but those can be an issue. So if you're following NIST, if you're following IEC, if you're overseas, it could be NIT2 or ISO. To tell you the truth, there is no standard right now that covers risk and OT. We are part of two working groups right now. One of the working groups that we're in, we're revising. So if you're familiar with NIST 8203, we're revising it to revision 4. And revision 4, what we've realized, another big issue we're seeing is building automation and control system, which makes up your HVAC, your access control, fire suppression, energy management. That is another vertical that we have seen across the US, so that people are like, hey, who's managing this environment? So if you want, get with your CE and I will send you, it's not out yet, but I'm actually the only managed service provider in this working group. So we have a lot of latest and greatest stuff that we like architectures, and we have this kind of a risk management guide for building automation control systems. So if you want a copy of that, I will send it to your CE and they'll send it to you. All right, unconverged
Hi,
environments.
Sam.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. We are at time if you wanted to take questions
Oh,
or
sure.
whatever you
Yes.
think is best. Whatever you think is
Yeah,
best.
yep. No, yeah, let's take questions. Yep. I think I covered a lot of the stuff in here.
Perfect. Then thank you. We will wait a second to see if anyone sends anything in the chat or the Q&A.
Sure.
Right, it looks like we got one from Derek McReynolds. Outside of the tool/product, what is the best way to manage and control third-party vendor access risk?
So the best way, I mean, well, first training and awareness, but there are a lot. So is it IT or OT environments? So if it's OT environments, there are vendors out there that have, well, first of all, look at your service level agreement. I feel that we are not putting a lot of the responsibility and liability on our third party vendors. A lot of times because we're reliant on them for the production, the maintenance, the installation of those devices. There's a guideline with an ISC. It's a life cycle, and the one I feel like we miss is specification and design. Because here's the thing, they're the ones installing a lot of this equipment. So before they even install it, they're responsible for making sure that the communication, how it connects and communicate is secure. Um, and if you feel that there's not there, you could Google secure remote access. There are some vendors like we use particular vendors specifically for that. Because here's the problem. Unfortunately, in a lot of OT environments, it's almost impossible to physically segment your IT and OT environment. It's impossible. I remember helping a large water facility. Unfortunately, I was a year after it was installed, and they were very annoyed with me because they're like, "Where were you a year ago when this was getting designed?" I said, "I apologize. I wasn't in that role." But technically, by standards and guidelines, IT and OT are supposed to be physically segmented. Unfortunately, that's not the case. So there are vendors out there that can logically segment or logically provide you with remote secure access. And to me, the big three things in the OT IT world is asset management, secure remote access, and then logical segmentation, because you can logically segment your environment, and that's what you could do.
All right, thank you. It looks like we have another question from Jeff Monforton. He said that one of the biggest issues water facilities face is the availability of money. Because of this, the statement from their management is, show me a regulation. How are those requirements faring?
So right now, so so here's the problem. So I just showed you that there are some money that's going to be released. So what happens is the federal government says, okay, I don't know if you remember about 5 years ago, the state and local grant program released $1 billion, and it was for state and local, tribal, and a lot of it was for anybody in cyber. There's the problem is that's the disconnect because when you look at the regulations that you have to put forth to the state, a lot of times these small municipal don't have the knowledge to fill them out correctly to get the money. So to me, that's the biggest issue. So we've actually filled out and assisted some municipalities in gaining grant money, and I think the max is like 250. But we are working actively with states across the U.S. to fix this problem because again, most states they don't have OT programs, and this is what we're trying to fix is those OT issues. So there is money, depending on what state you're in. Again, get with your CE, or if you have my email, send it to me, and I could send you with the guide because again, I came from CISA. I could give you the format that you need to fill out and how to fill out because what they're requiring is you have to establish governance. Um, and that's part of the whole cybersecurity framework 2.0. And then once you establish governance, then you could start spending the money for asset management, logical segmentation, or secure remote access. So send me information. I have tons of different links that you could go to that can assist you in building out your requests for those grants.
Thank you, Sam. All right, it looks like we've gotten all of them. Thank you, everyone. Again, our team will send out the slides and recording soon. Have a great rest of your day.